She had been walking the rugged trail for hours, snow piling up around her boots. Her breaths came in short, shaky bursts as the cold bit through every layer she wore. The wind howled like a living thing, pushing against her every step, slicing through the seams of her threadbare coat. Each gust carried a fresh wave of snow, sharp as broken glass, stinging her cheeks and eyes. Her lips were cracked, her fingers stiff and nearly numb inside her gloves, and every part of her body screamed for rest. But she couldn't stop, not now, not when she was this close. At least, she hoped she was close. The last mile marker was swallowed by the storm hours ago, and the path ahead blurred into the whitewash of falling snow and fading daylight. Her boots, already soaked through, squelched with every heavy step. The trail had once been clear, a dirt path winding through the mountain pass, but now it was buried in inches of fresh snow. She trudged on, one foot after the other, careful not to lose balance on the uneven ground beneath. Her back ached from the weight of her swollen belly, and the occasional jolt of pain tightening across her abdomen reminded her of the time she no longer had. She was due in a week, maybe less, but the baby had decided it didn't care about calendars. The contractions had started that morning, faint and irregular at first, but growing stronger as the day dragged on. Still, she couldn't afford to panic. She'd been alone for most of the journey, and she'd be alone through the end of it. She accepted that. All she needed was to reach the cabin. Just a little further. Her breath puffed visibly in the freezing air, short and shallow. She paused to catch it, pressing a hand to her side where the cold was burrowing deep into her ribs. Her scarf had loosened in the wind and was now soaked stiff with snow. She adjusted it with shaking fingers, then pulled her coat tighter across her belly, whispering softly to the life inside her. "We're gonna make it," she said, though her voice barely carried. "You and me, baby, will be okay." But her voice wavered, even as she tried to sound sure. The truth was, she didn't know where she was anymore. The trail had split at some point, and in the haze of exhaustion and blinding snow, she might have chosen the wrong way. The trees looked unfamiliar now, taller, darker, and the mountains loomed like silent watchers in the distance. Half swallowed by the sky, her legs buckled for a moment as another contraction rolled through her. She bit down hard, teeth clenched, eyes closed. She wouldn't scream. She couldn't. It wouldn't help. No one would hear her out here. When the pain faded, she forced herself upright again, gasping, shaking. Her knees throbbed, but she kept moving. She had no choice. If she sat down just for a minute, she might not get back up. She tried to remember the cabin, the one her aunt told her about. A tiny, weather-worn place with a wood stove and blankets and food. It had been abandoned years ago, but still stood, tucked near the base of the western ridge. She'd planned to reach it by dusk, light a fire, and wait out the storm. Maybe even give birth there if it came to that. But dusk had come and gone, and so had the trail markers, and the warmth in her hands, and the feeling in her feet. She blinked snowflakes from her lashes and looked up at the sky, now darkening with nightfall. Stars would appear soon, cold and distant, and with them the cold would deepen, sharp and merciless. Still she walked. Every step was a question, every breath a battle. Her strength was failing. She could feel it slipping away. But she refused to stop. Not while her child still moved inside her. Not while the promise of shelter was somewhere ahead, even if she no longer knew how far. And so, with the wind screaming through the trees and the snow rising above her ankles, she pressed forward. Alone, afraid, and nearly broken, but not done. Not yet. The path twisted endlessly, and the mountains offered no mercy. Her contractions had started earlier than expected, but there was no shelter, no town, and no one in sight. She had always known these mountains were dangerous, but she hadn't imagined they would be so silent, so utterly uncaring. The storm didn't slow for her suffering. The sky didn't lift. No smoke curled in the distance. No echo of a human voice bounced off the cliffs. Only wind, only snow. Only the sound of her boots dragging through the frozen earth and her own uneven breathing. She kept glancing around, hoping, praying for a glimpse of anything familiar. A broken fence, a wagon trail, a chimney. Even a scrap of old cloth on a branch that might say, "Someone has passed this way before." But there was nothing, just the cold. Her body tightened again. A deeper pain this time, sharper. It gripped her spine and twisted around her hips. She stopped walking, leaned against a snow-covered boulder, and bent forward with a low gasp. Her breath steamed in the air, fast and frightened. She held her belly with both arms, trying to steady her heart, trying to keep her legs from giving out. This wasn't like the others. This one lingered. The baby was coming. Not soon. Now. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. Not because she wasn't scared. She was terrified, but tears wouldn't help her out here. Crying wouldn't warm her skin or light a fire. She had to stay focused. Still hunched over, she looked up at the trail ahead. It curved along a narrow ridge and disappeared behind a wall of tall, pine-covered rock. No footprints in the snow but her own. No signs of recent life. And she knew what that meant. If she collapsed here, no one would find her. Not today. Not tomorrow. Maybe not ever. She could hear her aunt's voice in her memory now. That ridge. Past the old cedar line, that's where the cabin sits, tucked low in the rock. You'll know it by the rusted stovepipe. Had she passed the cedar line already? Or was it still ahead? The trees had long since vanished in the white swirl of the storm, their outlines blending into one another until everything looked like a dream. Or a nightmare. Her knees hit the ground, but she caught herself before she fully fell. Another contraction. Faster this time. Closer. She pressed her forehead against her arm, half buried in the snow now, and whispered, "Please." Just a little longer. But no voice answered back. No horse, no rider, no light. The trail remained cruel and empty. Her fingers clawed at the earth beneath the snow, trying to find something solid, something real to hold on to. And that's when it hit her. There was nowhere to go. No one was coming. If she was going to survive this, it had to be here. Right here, in the middle of the trail. The full weight of it dropped on her chest like the cold itself, like a blanket of stone. She was going to give birth. On this mountain. Alone. No hands to hold her. No voice to coach her. No blankets, no fire, no safety. Just snow. Just stone. Just her and the life inside her. And somehow she had to find the strength to do it. With pain tightening around her belly, she dropped to her knees. The snow was deep, the ground unkind, but she had no choice. The baby was coming, ready or not. The moment came without warning. A wave of pain surged through her lower back and wrapped around her like a vice. She gasped sharply, clutching her belly as her knees gave out beneath her. Her body crumpled, falling sideways into the snowbank lining the trail. The cold hit her skin like ice water, but the pain inside her was hotter than fire, raw, deep, and unstoppable. She tried to sit up but couldn't. Her arms trembled too violently, her vision swimming in and out of focus. It was like her muscles no longer belonged to her. She breathed in shallow bursts, trying to calm her pulse, trying to force her mind to stay sharp. But the cold crept in quickly. It wrapped itself around her spine and stole her warmth piece by piece. She had reached her limit. For hours she had walked with nothing but fear and hope pushing her forward. She had told herself she was strong enough, that she could make it, that if she just kept going, she would find shelter. But there was no more distance left to give. Her body had made the decision for her. She was going to give birth right here, on the hard trail. In the middle of a mountain pass, with no roof over her head, no blanket to cover her, no hands to catch the child. She turned to lie on her back, the snow crushing beneath her like powdered glass. She winced as her wet clothing clung to her skin. Her breath curled in thick white clouds above her as she stared at the gray sky, the falling flakes dusting her lashes, her hair, her trembling lips. Another contraction came, stronger now, tearing through her with brutal force. She groaned and bit down hard on the edge of her glove to keep from screaming. The pain stole her breath, her focus, her sense of time. She clenched her fists into the snow, digging her nails into the frozen crust until they bled. The baby was on its way. And fast out she shifted, trying to find a position, any position that could help. But every inch of movement was agony. The snow beneath her was soaked now, part with melted ice, part with sweat, part with something warmer and more frightening. Still, she fought to stay present. She couldn't afford to panic. She couldn't black out. If she lost control now, it could cost her everything. "I've got you," she whispered to her belly through gritted teeth. "I'm right here. We're doing this together." Her voice cracked, but her heart didn't. Not yet. The wind howled overhead, bending the trees. Far above her, the storm was building again. The sky darkened a little more. Time was slipping. Her lips trembled as she fought the urge to close her eyes, to rest, just for a second, but she couldn't. Not now. The snow beneath her hips was stained. She could feel the pressure building again. Her entire body braced. Another contraction slammed into her. She cried out this time, raw, broken, guttural. There was no one around to hear it anyway, and still, she fought. She didn't know how long she lay there. Minutes, hours, time had twisted into something meaningless. All she knew was this: she was on the edge, not just of the trail, of everything. But the child inside her was still moving, still alive, still trying. And so she would try to. If she had to die bringing this baby into the world, then she would do it on her feet, or on her back, or in the snow. Alone, yes, but not without a fight. Alone in the bitter wind, she cried out as labor took over. With trembling hands and clenched teeth, she brought new life into the world, with nothing but willpower and instinct to guide her. The wind screamed around her like a living thing, whipping her hair across her face, sending snow spiraling down in thick sheets. But she no longer noticed the cold. Her mind was locked in a storm of its own, a storm of pain, fear, and fierce determination. She was giving birth, right there on the frozen trail, with only snow and sky for witnesses. Her legs burned, her hips strained, and every nerve in her body begged for relief. But she kept going. Each contraction came like a wave crashing down, and she rode them with nothing but grit and instinct. She gritted her teeth, fists buried in the snow, and pushed. There was no one to tell her when to breathe. No one to count. No midwife. No blanket. Just her. Just pain. And just a fire inside her that refused to go out. She shifted slightly, curling forward despite the burning in her spine. Her breath was ragged, her face wet with a mix of snow, sweat, and tears. Her coat lay half open now, pulled aside in the struggle. Beneath it, her dress was soaked and clinging, stained by the toll of birth already underway. She could feel the baby moving lower, closer. Her heart pounded louder than the wind. "Come on, baby," she whispered, voice trembling. "Come on. I need you to fight with me." She screamed again, not out of fear this time, but power. A raw, primal cry that echoed through the mountain pass, swallowed quickly by the storm. Her entire body arched with effort as she bore down once more, tears slipping down her cheeks from pain she didn't have words for. And then, a shift, a release. A cry. Not hers, but the baby single quotes S. High-pitched, weak, but alive. She sobbed, half in disbelief, half in joy, as she reached down with shaking hands. Her fingers, stiff with cold, fumbled but found the tiny, squirming body now in the snow beside her. She pulled the baby into her arms, cradling it against her chest, shielding it from the wind with her coat. A girl, red-faced, tiny, crying, but breathing. She stared at her child through tear-blurred eyes, heart thundering with relief and pride and something deeper, something ancient. She had done it. Against all odds, she had brought her child into this world with nothing but strength and the desperate, wild love only a mother could know. "You're here," she whispered, pressing her lips to the baby's head. "You're safe." But they weren't safe. Not yet. Her hands moved quickly, wrapping what little she had, her scarf, the inner lining of her coat, around the baby. She tucked the child under her chin, letting her own body heat protect the fragile skin now exposed to the biting cold. The baby cried again, softer now, and the sound gave her a second wind. She wouldn't die here. Not now. She'd made it through the worst. The pain, the fear, the solitude. She had faced death and delivered life, and though she was weak, though every part of her ached, her spirit burned like a torch in the darkness. She had something to live for. Someone. She didn't know where help would come from. She didn't even know if it would come. But she knew this. As long as her heart was beating and the baby was breathing, she would not give in to the cold. Not now. Not ever. The baby's cries cut through the cold air, fragile yet full of life. She wrapped the child in her own shawl, shivering and bleeding, unsure if she had enough strength left to move. The mountains had never been this quiet. Moments ago, the air had been filled with her screams, the pounding of her heartbeat, and the wind tearing through the trees like a beast unleashed. But now there was only stillness, a heavy, reverent kind of silence, as if even the storm paused to honor what had just happened. The baby stirred in her arms, small, warm, alive. The tiny cries that once echoed off the snowy ridge had faded, now into soft whimpers, the kind that only a mother could understand. She looked down at the child wrapped tightly against her chest, her own torn shawl the only barrier between her newborn and the biting cold. Her hands trembled as she adjusted the cloth, careful to tuck it under the baby's chin. The wind had slowed, but it hadn't stopped. The snow still fell in soft, steady flakes, clinging to her hair, her lashes, the edges of her coat. She could barely feel her fingers anymore. They were stiff, uncooperative, red and swollen. Still, she used them, because the baby needed warmth. Because there was no one else. She pressed her lips to the baby's forehead and closed her eyes for just a moment. A tear slipped down her cheek, not from pain or even from fear this time. It was something quieter, a sadness maybe, or an understanding that this child had come into the world in the loneliest way imaginable. No cradle, number, firelight, no welcoming arms, just her, a woman bleeding into the snow. And a newborn clinging to her heartbeat. She tried to move. Slowly, she pushed one elbow into the snow to lift herself. Her body refused. Her muscles were done, her limbs heavy and shaking. Pain shot up her spine, and she collapsed again into the frozen ground with a quiet gasp. She couldn't even feel her legs now, the warmth that had rushed through her. When the baby cried, that spark of survival, it was already slipping away. The adrenaline had passed. The silence around her was too quiet now, too still. As if the mountain had closed in again, she looked up. The sky was gray, the trees black and still. No birds, no riders, no rescue. Only snow. She cradled the baby tighter, whispering soft words she barely had the strength to form. You're okay, my girl. Her voice cracked. She wasn't sure if she was trying to comfort the baby or herself. Maybe both. Blood soaked into the snow beneath her. She knew it was bad, knew what that kind of bleeding meant. But she didn't panic. She just laid her head back, blinking slowly, keeping her cheek close to the baby's. "If I don't make it," she whispered faintly, "you fight, you keep going." But the baby didn't answer, just breathed, just existed. Alive. She let the silence wash over her again. Not out of surrender, but out of peace. For one moment, there was nothing left to do. No decision to make, no trail to follow. Just the sound of tiny breaths against her chest. Just a mother and child, still and quiet in the snow. Together. Asterisk. The snow kept falling. Her vision blurred. Every breath felt heavier than the last. She whispered to her baby, holding on only for the tiny heartbeat pressed against her chest. The world around her began to fade, not all at once, but in slow pieces. The sharp lines of the trees softened. The endless gray sky above started to blur, as if seen through water. She blinked hard, trying to clear her vision, but it didn't help. Her eyelids were too heavy now. The cold was inside her bones, deep in her blood. She could feel it crawling toward her heart. The baby shifted softly in her arms, letting out a faint, hiccuping cry. That sound small, human, alive, pulled her back from the edge. She wasn't dead yet. She couldn't be. Not with her child still breathing. The trail she had walked just hours ago felt like a lifetime behind her. She had come so far too, far to stop here, and yet she could feel her body giving in. Every part of her was shutting down, muscles limp, skin pale, warmth stolen by the snow that soaked through every layer she wore. Her hands no longer shook. They were past that now. Past pain, past panic. Just numb, and that terrified her more than anything. She couldn't die. Not here. Not now. She lowered her face close to her baby's, her cracked lips brushing the soft skin beneath the shawl. The warmth there was fragile, like a candle's flame in a storm. She didn't know how long it would last. The baby needed her. And she was slipping away. "No," she murmured, barely a whisper. "Not like this." She tried to lift her head again, tried to shift her body just a little higher on the trail. But she could barely move. Her lower half was frozen in place, her legs wet with blood and snow. She didn't even know how much she'd lost, only that it was too much. Her breath came out in broken gasps. Each inhale hurt. Each exhale was slower than the last. She had heard stories about people freezing to death. How it didn't hurt. Not at the end. How the cold turned gentle, peaceful, almost like sleep. But she didn't want peace. She wanted fire. She wanted to live. Even now, as the cold wrapped around her like a shroud, her heart beat on, weak but steady. Still fighting, she pressed her palm over the baby's back, feeling for that tiny flutter of life. And when she found it, that soft, steady heartbeat, she let out a tearless sob. That sound meant everything. That sound meant hope. And hope was enough. If her body gave out here, so be it. But she would not give up her will. She would not let the cold have the last word. She forced her eyes open again, peering through the falling snow, scanning the trail ahead. Her vision flickered like a dying flame, but she kept looking. Nothing moved. Just white. Just silence. Still. She stared into the emptiness, refusing to close her eyes. Someone had to come. Something had to break this silence. She just had to hold on a little longer. She whispered again to her child, her voice raw, fragile, almost. "Gone. I'm here. I'm still here." But she didn't know how much longer that would be true. Just as her eyes began to close, the faint sound of hooves echoed through the silence. A shadow approached through the snow, tall, silent, riding fast. She didn't hear it at first. Not clearly. It was faint, just a soft rhythm in the wind. So distant it could have been imagined. But then it came again. the unmistakable crunch of hooves striking snow-packed earth. She froze, not from fear, but disbelief. For hours there had been nothing, no sound, no movement, only the howl of the wind and her own shallow breath. But now something was coming. Something real. She forced her eyes open. The edges of her vision were still blurred, heavy with exhaustion and frostbite, but she could see the shadow ahead. A figure. High in the saddle. Broad. Shouldered. Cutting through the storm like it wasn't there. The horse moved with quiet urgency, its breath puffing like steam in the freezing air. Its rider sat tall and steady, wrapped in a thick fur-lined cloak, hair whipping behind him like a black flag in the wind. He looked like something out of an old story, not quite real, a towering figure born of silence and snow. She tried to lift her hand, but it barely moved. Still, he saw her. The horse slowed, hooves crunching softly as they neared her collapsed body. He didn't shout, didn't ask questions. He simply stared down at her from the saddle, eyes sharp, unreadable beneath the brim of his hat. Then, without a word, he dismounted. He moved with quiet certainty, like he had done this before, like nothing in this moment surprised him. Snow crunched under his boots as he knelt beside her. His large hands reached out, brushing the hair from her face, checking her breath, then resting gently over the child wrapped against her chest. His brow furrowed. He saw the blood, the frostbite, the dark edges of collapse threatening her life. But the baby was breathing, and so was she. She wanted to speak, to say thank you, or please, or anything at all, but her lips wouldn't form the words. She just looked at him with eyes full of quiet desperation. Her heart beat once, then again, slow and faint. That was enough for him. Without hesitation, he slipped his arms beneath her back and knees and lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all. The baby, still wrapped tightly in the shawl, remained cradled between their chests. He held them both, mother and child, close to his chest and stood. The warmth of his body was the first heat she had felt in hours. Hit her like a wave. And then everything went dark. But this time, it wasn't the cold dragging her under. It was safety. It was someone's arms. It was the feeling of not being alone anymore. And in the fading seconds of consciousness, before the snow swallowed her sight, she heard the soft snort of the horse, the creak of the saddle, and the whisper of a blanket being draped over them. Then the voice, low, steady, and sure. "I've got you." He saw her, dismounted without a word, and lifted both mother and child into his arms. The trail was still cold, but hope had finally arrived. The giant Apache held them both against his chest, the woman pale and still, the baby wrapped tightly in her arms, barely stirring now. Snow clung to her hair, to her skin, to the soaked fabric of her dress, but he didn't flinch. He had seen worse, carried heavier burdens through colder nights. He walked slowly toward his horse, his boots crunching over the trail she had once walked, step by painful step. The same trail that had nearly claimed her life. He shifted her carefully in his arms and mounted the horse with practiced strength, settling her in front of him, their bodies protected by his thick coat and blanket. His hand never left the child. Always checking, always shielding. She didn't speak. She couldn't. Her head rested against his shoulder, her breath faint against his neck. But she was alive. And that was enough. The trail ahead was long. He knew the path well, a hunter's cabin not far from here, tucked into the base of the hills where the wind couldn't reach. There would be fire, water, warmth. He gave the reins a slight tug, and the horse began to move, steady, sure, guided by instinct as much as the man riding it. Snow still fell, and the wind still whispered through the trees. But something had changed in the mountains. Something small, quiet, sacred. Where there had once been silence, There was now the steady rhythm of hooves. Where there had once been death, there was now life, fragile, bundled in wool and blood and breath. She stirred once, just enough to tighten her grip on the baby. Her eyes fluttered open for a heartbeat and met his. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. He gave a small nod. "You rest now," he said, barely louder than the wind. "I'll get you home." The mountain said nothing, but the cold seemed to pull back, just slightly, as if it, too, had heard. And so they rode, through the snow, through the silence, through the place where death had nearly won, until somewhere, far off the trail, a soft orange glow lit up a cabin window, and the fire inside began to warm the cold out of her bones. She had made it. They both had. And in the quiet arms of a stranger, carried through the darkness, she finally slept, not from weakness, but peace.